Why Ukrainians resist. 10 examples from history when Russia pressed the rights of Ukrainians. Some people do not understand why Ukrainians are fighting so desperately with Russia. After all, it would be easier to surrender and save tens of thousands of lives from tragedy. Why do Ukrainians not think so? Because this is not the first case of infringement of their freedom by Russia. The entire history of the relationship between Russians and Ukrainians is riddled with infringement of rights and freedoms of Ukrainians, and today they have a chance to defend their freedom. We are providing at least 10 cases of infringement of rights and freedoms of Ukrainians by Russia, from the 14th century to the present day. 1. In the 14th century, the Grand Duchy of Moscow, which emerged as the dominant state in the Russian territories, claimed to be the successor state of Kievsn Rus and attempted to exert control over the territories that are now Ukraine. In the 14th century, a new state emerged in the Russian territories, known as the Grand Duchy of Moscow. As it gained power and influence, it began to assert itself as the successor state of Kievsn Rus, the medieval federation of Eastern Slavic tribes that existed from the 9th to the 13th century. The territories that now make up Ukraine were also part of Kievsn Rus, and Moscow's claim to be the successor state of Kievsn Rus was an attempt to exert control over these territories and assert its dominance over the Eastern Slavic people. The Grand Duchy of Moscow began to expand its territories through wars and treaties, and it gradually gained control over the lands that now make up much of modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The Moscow's ruling dynasty, the Rurikids, claimed to be descendants of the Rurik, the legendary founder of Kievsn Rus, and they used this claim to justify their rule over the Eastern Slavic lands. However, this claim to the legacy of Kievsn Rus was not universally accepted. The neighboring states and principalities, such as the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, also claimed to be the heirs of Kievsn Rus and had their own vision of the Eastern Slavic history and identity. Furthermore, the local populations in the territories that Moscow attempted to exert control over had their own traditions, culture, and identity. The Moscow's expansion and its claim to be the successor state of Kievsn Rus were a source of tension and conflict between Moscow and its neighbors. 2. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the Russian Empire began to expand and exert control over the territories that are now Ukraine, and attempted to suppress the Ukrainian culture and impose Russian culture and language in these territories. This expansion was driven by several factors, including the desire for new lands, resources, and trade routes, as well as a desire to spread the Russian Orthodox Christianity to the neighboring regions. As the Russian Empire expanded into Ukraine, it began to suppress the Ukrainian culture and impose Russian culture and language in these territories. This was done through a variety of means, including the suppression of the Ukrainian language and the promotion of the Russian language, the suppression of Ukrainian customs and traditions, and the imposition of Russian laws and institutions. The Russian Empire also attempted to deny the existence of a distinct Ukrainian identity, and instead portrayed Ukrainians as a subgroup of the Russian people. The suppression of the Ukrainian culture and the imposition of Russian culture and language had a profound impact on the Ukrainian people and their identity. Many Ukrainians were forced to adopt Russian language and customs, and they were denied the right to express their own culture and identity. Furthermore, the suppression of Ukrainian culture and language was aimed at erasing the legacy of Kievsn Rus and the distinct Ukrainian identity, and to assert Russia's dominance over the region. The cultural suppression by the Russian Empire in the 17th and 18th centuries laid the foundation for the long history of oppression and tension between Ukraine and Russia. It has also contributed to the cultural differences between the two countries that persist to this day, and it has played a role in shaping the relationship between Ukraine and Russia as we know it today. 3. In the 19th century, the Russian Empire imposed policies of Russification aimed at assimilating the Ukrainian culture, language, and history into the Russian culture, language, and history. In the 19th century, the Russian Empire continued its efforts to exert control over the territories that are now Ukraine, and imposed policies of Russification aimed at assimilating the Ukrainian culture, language, and history into the Russian culture, language, and history. Russification was a set of policies aimed at promoting the Russian language, culture, and identity, and suppressing other languages and cultures. In the case of Ukraine, the Russian Empire imposed strict rules on the use of the Ukrainian language in education, government, and public life. They also suppressed Ukrainian traditions, customs, and history. The Russian Empire also attempted to deny the existence of a distinct Ukrainian identity and history, and instead portrayed Ukrainians as a subgroup of the Russian people. The Russification policies had a profound impact on the Ukrainian culture and identity. Many Ukrainians were forced to adopt Russian language and customs, and they were denied the right to express their own culture and identity. Furthermore, the suppression of Ukrainian culture and language was aimed at erasing the legacy of Kievsn Rus and the distinct Ukrainian identity, and to assert Russia's dominance over the region. The Russification policies also contributed to the rise of the Ukrainian national identity and the desire for independence. Many Ukrainians began to resist the Russification policies and to assert their own culture, language, and identity. This led to the emergence of a strong Ukrainian national movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which aimed for the autonomy of Ukraine. 4. During the Soviet period, the Soviet government implemented policies of Russification, which aimed to assimilate the Ukrainian culture, history, and language into the Russian culture, history, and language. These policies were continuation of the policies of the Russian Empire, and were aimed at suppressing the Ukrainian culture and identity and promoting a Russian culture and identity. The Soviet government imposed strict rules on the use of the Ukrainian language in education, government, and public life. They also suppressed Ukrainian traditions, customs, and history. They also promoted the Russian language and culture as the dominant culture in the Soviet Union. 5. During the Soviet period, the Soviet government also implemented policies of collectivization which led to forced relocation of people, famine, and repression of the national identity of the Ukrainian people. The collectivization policy had a devastating impact on the Ukrainian people and their rights. Millions of Ukrainian peasants were forcibly relocated to collective farms, where they were forced to give up their land and private property. Many were also subjected to repression, arrest, and even execution for resisting collectivization. The collectivization policy also led to a man-made famine, known as the holodomor, in which millions of Ukrainians died as a result of the government's forced requisition of grain and food. The famine, which is widely considered to be a genocide, was a direct result of the collectivization policy, and it was aimed at repressing the Ukrainian national identity and culture. The collectivization policy also led to a significant decline in the standard of living for the Ukrainian people. They were forced to work long hours in collective farms, under harsh conditions, and with little compensation. Many were also denied the right to freedom of movement, and were not allowed to leave the collective farms. So during the Soviet period, the Soviet government's policy of forced collectivization led to the infringement of the rights of Ukrainians. It led to the forced relocation of people, the confiscation of private property, repression, arrest, and even execution for those who resisted collectivization. It also led to a man-made famine, known as the holodomor, in which millions of Ukrainians died as a result of the government's forced requisition of grain and food. The collectivization policy was not only aimed at modernizing and industrializing the agricultural sector, but also at repressing the Ukrainian national identity and culture. It led to a significant decline in the standard of living for the Ukrainian people, who were forced to work long hours in collective farms, under harsh conditions, and with little compensation. The collectivization policy was one of the most significant infringement of rights and repression of the Ukrainian people during the Soviet period, and its impact is still felt to this day. 6. During World War II, the Soviet government deported thousands of Ukrainians to Siberia and other parts of the Soviet Union in an attempt to suppress the Ukrainian national identity. The Soviet government implemented a policy of mass deportations of ethnic groups deemed to be a potential threat to the Soviet Union's security. One of the groups targeted were Ukrainians, who were seen as a potential fifth column due to their strong national identity and historical grievances with Moscow. As a result, thousands of Ukrainians were rounded up and forcibly removed from their homes and communities and sent to Siberia and other remote regions of the Soviet Union. The deportations were often carried out in brutal and inhumane conditions, with entire families separated and sent to different locations. The deportees were subjected to harsh living conditions, forced labor, and repression. The Soviet government's aim was to suppress the Ukrainian national identity by breaking up communities, destroying families and tradition, so that it would be harder for the Ukrainian identity to survive. The Soviet government also aimed to use the deportees as a source of cheap labor for the construction of industrial and infrastructure projects in the remote regions of the Soviet Union. The impact of the deportations on the Ukrainian people was devastating. Many lost their homes, property, and livelihoods. Families were separated, and many died as a result of the harsh living conditions and forced labor. The deportations also had a lasting impact on the Ukrainian national identity and culture, as many of the deportees were leaders of the community and carriers of traditional culture and language. So during World War I, the Soviet government's policy of mass deportations of Ukrainians to Siberia and other parts of the Soviet Union was an attempt to suppress the Ukrainian national identity. The deportations were carried out in brutal and inhumane conditions, with entire families separated and sent to different locations. The impact of the deportations on the Ukrainian people was devastating and has had a lasting impact on the Ukrainian national identity and culture. 7. In the post-Soviet era, Russia has continued to exert economic and political influence over Ukraine, which has led to tensions and conflicts, particularly over issues such as Crimea and the status of Russian-speaking populations in Ukraine. 8. In 2014, Russia annexed Crimea, violating the sovereignty of Ukraine. 9. In the same year, pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, with support of Russia, declared independence and started a war in the Donbass region, which has caused thousands of deaths and displacement of people. 10. The full-scale war against Ukraine. As we can see, today's confrontation between Ukraine is the result of centuries of oppression by Russia, and we all hope that this time, justice will prevail. If you liked the video, we would appreciate likes and subscriptions. See you.